We have with us Reverend Father Dr. Francis Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, Chennai. A dynamic personality, well known for his inventing the 25th hour concept and practice through time management, highly intellectual person and scholar, man of the poor, and a loved Jesuit. Father, we are indeed very happy to have you with us here today, and now this time is yours. I take this privilege to invite you to address this gathering. Over to you, Father.
Morning to you all. Reverend Father Boniface, the Rector, Reverend Father Thomas, Principal of Loyola College, Reverend Father Lawrence, at the Department of Philosophy, Father Jagdish, the convener, and all the speakers, professors, and my dear fellow Jesuits. Thank you for inviting me, and I would like to share my views on discovering self, the scientific perspective. The thread of thought in my sharing would be comprehension, consciousness, and communication. Science is about observation, measurement, and interpretation about how the reality functions. In science, subjective observations are interpreted based on objective measurements for all to understand. Further, science continues to provide more and more intuition that often lead to religious enlightenment. Science believes that the self does exist. The experience of having a self is expressed through the feelings of pain and of pleasure, of control, intentionality and agency, of self-governance, of acting according to one's beliefs and desires, the sense of engaging with the physical world and the social world. All these offer scientific evidence of the existence of the self. The scientific self implies skills, competencies, qualities, a disposition one acquires in one's life. And the scientific perspective of self develops through two streams. One, physical or biological sciences leading to human development, and two, social sciences with a focus on interactions, relationships, and communication. Science perceives and understands the self as an integrated growth process of awareness tending to fullness. It's an understanding as potential becoming actual reality through critical thinking leading to social consciousness. Non-physical consciousness might understand the self as creator designed to be the essence of human beings and perhaps the other beings as well, using the non-physical substance of soul or spirit. We can understand that science in general perceives the self as the potential to comprehend the reality and the impulse to communicate for integral unification and fullness of the universe. Self as comprehension. The self can be viewed mainly under three phases, namely physical, mental, and spiritual. There will be many intermediate phases as well if one wants to go in detail. One, physical life. In the science of evolution, the theory of evolution has several variants. Darwin's is the most scientifically established one. Darwin's theory that all species of life have descended from common ancestors is now widely accepted and considered as a fundamental concept in science. Evolution is considered as development of complexity of nervous system. This might imply that we might possess something in common along with something specific acquired down the process chain of evolution. 2. Mental life is the outcome of physical evolution, and this stage consists of ego, superego, according to Sigmund Freud. The ego and superego are a set of three concepts in psychoanalytic theory describing distinct interacting agents in the psychic apparatus. The three agents are theoretical constructs that describe the activities and interactions of the mental life of a person. And 3, spiritual life, according to Xavier, is the culmination of the process of evolution. Physical evolution becomes intellectual evolution. This was termed as noosphere, dominated by consciousness, the mind, and interpersonal relationships. Xavier considered the technological and scientific advancements as byproducts of this phase. Then comes in the spiritual evolution, where the entire process converges and merges into the omega point. Finally, the process of material elements evolving into physical entity, moving up the ladder of evolution as intellectual and finally spiritual plane, is actually completing the ascending spiral of consciousness. When the material element becomes evolved as physical entity, there comes in sensation. When physical moved into mental state, there was thinking and emotions. And when finally spiritual state dawned, there came in consciousness. The self or specificity was dormant in elements. It became sensient feeling on the physical niveau as individual entity, and then the society, and finally it grew into conscious of the universe. It might be difficult to demarcate the borderline or transition from material to immaterial, the non-living to the living beings. The comprehension with ascending intensity has the phase of inter, and trans comprehension. Comprehension of the self begins as monad, whether according to the philosophy of Leibniz, as an indivisible and hence ultimately simple entity, such as an atom or a person, or a single-celled organism, especially a flagellate protogeny. Here, the intra-comprehension is perceived as dormant. Then, as nervous system become more and more complex in the evolution process, intercomprehension comes in, extending from oneself to other similar or different entities or species. This state ushers in trans-comprehension in realizing the material becoming intellectual, spiritual, or a power beyond in that order. In the Einsteinian equation E is equal to mc square, matter is presented as equivalent to energy. David Bohm, an American British scientist, argues that reality is tripartite, namely matter and mass, energy and consciousness. He would state, I quote, "Consciousness is a coherent whole which is never static or complete, but which is an unending process of movement and unfoldment. End of the quote. Energy could be understood as physical, mental, spiritual, extending to divine, that is, divine energy as grace. The final comprehension is converging in or merging with the divine as the end station of reality known as the Omega point, where the evolution of material ascends into physical, intellectual, spiritual, and divine reality. Hawking and Vladimir proposed in their book The Grand Design that there is an intelligent or grand design that keeps the universe going, but there is no discussion about who the grand designer might be. Now, self as consciousness. The initial evolution process, namely thinking and feeling, brings in the onset of intelligence as reflexive knowledge, manifesting as comprehension. We might have noticed that it takes longer for the heart to accept what the head already knows. From knowing flows feeling. Comprehension ascends into consciousness that grows out of and transcends perception, thoughts, feelings, maturing as awareness. Consciousness, at its simplest, is sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. For Bohm, consciousness involves awareness, attention, perception, acts of understanding, and perhaps yet more. Freud proposed 3 levels of awareness, namely a conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious. These 3 levels correspond to or overlap with these ideas of id, ego, and superego. The conscious level comprises all we are aware of about ourselves and our surroundings. The pre-conscious are memories which could be retrieved from the past experience, and the unconscious is an area outside of conscious awareness which are stored out of our awareness but could nevertheless influence our behavior. The conscious level is considered to have 7 states, starting with first individual focused, then universal oriented, and finally dissolving into the ultimate consciousness. These states are waking consciousness, deep sleep, dreaming, transcendental consciousness, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, and unity consciousness. The first 3 are individual related, whether physically active or not. It is associated with functional nervous system. The next 2 transcend the individual and take on social and cosmic dimensions. And finally, it converges or merges or dissolves in deep consciousness. The mind-body could be trained to reach the universal or unity consciousness. Once again, as Bohm would put it, deep down, the consciousness of mankind is one. This evolutionary process from nervous system becoming consciousness concretizes in communication. The ultimate consciousness is that there is energy which pervades and unites everything, and this interconnectedness is realized as communication. And finally, self as communication. Knowing or comprehending oneself matures as becoming conscious of others or of other entities, culminating in communication with them. The development of senses starting from single cell to plants, animals and humans are classified as touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste and awareness. Communication in the brain is due to neurons as chemical energy via neurotransmitters. Some call the sixth sense or the seventh one as proprioception, which makes our brain understand where our body is in space. Proprioception, for example, enables a person to touch his or her finger to the tip of their nose, even with their eyes closed, and to climb steps without looking at each one. It is related to the development or evolution of genes. This evolutionary development not only results in growth of perception but also communication, inter, and trans-communication. Harari, in his book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, narrates how human beings began to communicate, first through sound, then with signs followed by drawings, before primitive form of language emerged. This communication has gone through so much of advancement that people think that we could now even communicate with the aliens from other planets. The movie E.T., The Extraterrestrial by Spielberg brings out, at least in imagination, the possibility of understanding aliens and the ability of aliens demonstrating their potential to learn our language. Russell narrates in her book The Sparrow how a Jesuit, after capturing a few notes from the outer space, could go to that space, contact the people who were musically talented, and build up communication with them. Recently, as you know, astronomers stumbled upon unknown space objects beaming out radio signals every 18 minutes. And the physicist Capra, in his Tower Physics, draws the parallel between the modern physics and the Eastern mysticism. According to Tower Physics, 1. Everything is interconnected. 2. Every entity from planets to subatomic particles is ever moving and ever changing. And 3. This constant change and motion lead from temporality to permanent unity. Science of intellectual knowledge discovers self as an integral part of heart or emotion, eventually leading to self-realization or self-actualization through consciousness and communication. From comprehension, consciousness and communication, the self begins to discover much more than self as a monad to a particle in the ocean of the cosmos. 1. The discovery of self starts from knowing oneself as originating from atoms, molecules, cells, etc. As the physical self grows up, psychological and social aspects bring in medical comprehension, eventually leading to the limited comprehension to incomparable admiration of something beyond known as transcendence or divinity in religious understanding. 2. The intellectual knowledge has led to the realization that humankind was entrusted with the task to work and to take care of the earth where we live, move and have our being as the offspring of the power that created us in His image and likeness, Imago Dei. In fact, the understanding became the consciousness of our power as we gain more and more knowledge, insight, and expertise in science and technology. Humankind has begun to exploit our from home, and our digital society has brought in faceless world, the more communication facilities we have, the less we keep up with personal communication with each other. 3. The comprehension of self and its consciousness have brought in self-destruction. Fistenberg, in his soul-searching book, The Invisible Rainbow, explains how electricity has shaped the modern world, but at the same time how cell towers, Wi-Fi, 5G, etc. have affected our health and environment, causing major diseases of industrialized civilization such as heart diseases, diabetes, cancer, etc. caused by electrical pollution as radiation. 4. But there is also the possibility of self-actualization. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks on care for our common home. He laments environmental degradation and global warming and calls all people of the world to take swift and unified global action to save this world and our lives as well. 5. In the process of discovering self, we see on the one hand a scientific understanding of life cycle from Big Bang to Big Crunch, which seems to be a parallel to Thomas Aquinas' exitus et reditus concept. In a natural sense, this cycle could be understood like the cycle of seasons in a year. Tender shoots in the spring becomes beautiful leaves in the summer, but when the autumn, there is the foliage and fall of leaves, giving way in the winter to denuded trees, bringing in melancholic scene to begin all over again in the next spring. The cyclic process indicates that unless leaves fall down and disappear, no new blade could appear. This temporal reality makes one understand that we are invited to recognize and grow in universal fraternity, and eventually we would merge with higher energy. The self that was dominant in elements emerges alive in birth, grows in understanding and consciousness, attains fullness in communication, and finally merges with the higher energy of power, the ultimate consciousness. And the revelation is, discovering of self from scientific perspective begins from knowledge about oneself, becomes comprehension, grows as consciousness of the universe, and expands in communication with all therein. This process transforms one from material to spiritual realm. For Hopkins, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Francis of Assisi realizes the interrelated universe where he is conscious of brother sun, sister moon. Ignatius of Loyola understands how he discovers self from elements to divinity when he writes in the Spiritual Exercises number 235, I quote, I will consider how God dwells in creatures, in the elements, giving them existence, in the plants, giving them life, in the animals, giving them sensation, in human beings, giving them intelligence, and finally, how in this way he dwells also in myself, giving me existence, life, sensation, and intelligence, and even further, making me his temple, since I am created as a likeness and image of the divine majesty. End of the quote. Thus, the human being is the fullness of self, which has been evolving from the elements, plants, animals, and human beings. This evolution of discovery of self goes even beyond as universal consciousness and its ultimate convergence in the good energy or the primordial energy or the ultimate consciousness. And this divine omnipresence, for Ignatius, is the hub of contact and communication with all entities in the universe, as He labors and works for me in all the creatures on the face of the earth, weaving a web of communication. Capra also sees a parallel between particle physics and the power beyond. He draws a parallel between Shiva's cosmic dance and the dance of subatomic particles, which are in constant motion. According to Capra, I quote, modern physics has shown that the rhythm of creation and destruction is not only manifest in the turn of the seasons and in the birth and death of all living creatures, but is also the very essence of inorganic matter. And that, for the modern physicists, then, Shiva's dance is the dance of subatomic matter. End of the quote. The human history has been an evolution of discovery. When fire was discovered, the self of the energy of youth. When electricity was discovered, the self of modernity made inroad. When digitization was discovered, the self of new age dawned. But all these discoveries have helped us discover self better, stage by stage, ever ascending in understanding, especially its potential, both positive and negative. In our days, the discovery of self is taking us more towards destruction of self. We are yet to discover self of meaning in life, individual and collective. Finding meaning in life would bring in a sense of responsibleness for the very essence of human existence towards the rest in the reality. As the pre-Indian prophecy says, when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that one cannot eat money. It is already late, but before it is too late, we need to discover self for goodness, fullness, and happiness in life. The self is also capable of finding creativity in a crisis. Human beings have weathered many a crisis in the past and have managed to bounce back every time. Self has that potential energy from being to becoming. As science explores the how of the reality, the self understands the why of it and strives to find fullness of meaning and integrated unity. Thank you very much.